What do you think the most insane thing a Hollywood writer could do right now is? Because they've done it. And about the next 5 things. Because when you look at their past output for something like Rings of Power, She-Hulk, The Witcher Blood Origin, or Velma, the last thing on my mind is that these people need a pay rise. And yet that is exactly what's happening. Hollywood writers think they've spent the last few years creating such magnificent content, such incredible value for the customers and the businesses that they deserve to have a massive list of demands met. Because they did ask for their minimums to be increased, which was responded to, albeit slightly less. But the stranger requests are further down, like wanting to be paid out weekly, which was soundly rejected. And at first it can appear reasonable. I do think it's weird that they get paid 50% upfront before any work is done. But why not pay them weekly afterwards? Well, it turns out, and this is from someone who's advertising the strike itself, so he's on the writer's side, that it's simply because the companies want to get them to do extra drafts before they release the payment. Producers have been holding the last payment, which was the second half, until they got the drafts done. So in other words, until they completed the work to the satisfaction of the company. This is a very normal practice for contractors, that you actually have to make the customer happy with your work before they give you the second payment. And yet the writers see it as like they're getting work for free. They just want power over us, with them actually demanding we write something quality for them. Not that that's been happening in the past anyway. And the requests get crazier the more you go down, such as a minimum staffing level of 6 writers. Doesn't matter whether a project only actually requires 1 writer to make it. No, now you're forced to hire 6 people, which will inevitably water down all of their wages. If anything, it seems like they're trying to create a false demand for writers because the supply is far outweighing what is actually required at the moment. And then you combine forced hiring practices with minimum week guarantees of work. Oh yeah, I mean, this project only has 2 weeks work for you, but we're gonna have to pay you for 13 just because you've put it in the contract. None of this seems to be run like a professional, profit-driven business. You know, the kind of business where you get paid based on the value that you create. Nor is this based on individual negotiation, based off personal merit, and a person getting paid what they deserve. No, this is more like talking to the Borg.
Resistance is futile. From this time forward, you will service us.
It's not about individuals getting paid what they're worth. It's about how can we increase our numbers and drag more drones into the workforce. And I did consciously decide on the Borg analogy, but there was another one from Marvel writers that I think would have worked equally as well. I know socialism's a charged word, but we can learn a lot from the ants. A quote from Ant-Man Quantumania that forgot that ants are a monarchy with a queen. And yet it would be a great analogy to the demands and the strike in general with the picket lines. Those which were visited by Hassan himself, with a great sign in the back there, "We're taking our yacht back, bozos." Truly showing that creative talent that Hollywood desperately needs back in the office. In fact, that was far from the only sign, and these are Hollywood writers. This is the massive, creative, collective intellect of one of the most significant entertainment industries in the West. So you know these placards are going to be amazing. They've had days, weeks to think of that one punchline, to write on their sign and really leave everyone that watches it in amazement. This is going to convince everybody to support their side. That's how you know you're going to get quality from an article titled 25 Absolutely Brilliant Signs from the Hollywood Writers' Strike. Their writers, you knew their signs were going to be good. Number 1, this sign is hilarious. "We come to this place to strike." That She-Hulk score looking more impressive by the second, isn't it? Maybe that was just unlucky. What's in number 2? "My neck, my back. We need a fair contract." Beginning to explain why they're trying to crowbar more writers into every writer's room, aren't we? I mean, would you hire that voluntarily? But I don't know, this is just the start. Maybe the good ones are at the end and they've done the countdown backwards. So number 24, this adorable sign from The Mandalorian. "This is not the way." No, you're right, it certainly isn't. Although I have to say, like any good writer, they left the best to last. Don't worry, it's safe to assume these two are comedy writers. Can we make this contract more accessible to a wider audience? You do realize that that's become a cliched meme that literally means what you're creating is going to be trash, right? And this is what you're trying to convince people to give you more money with. And the last one, "My edible just kicked in. I'll do this all night. I demand to be hired on your production for at least 13 weeks. Oh, by the way, I'm not sober." Hey, maybe it's normal in Hollywood, but I wouldn't be bragging about it during contract negotiations. But when you're at the cutting edge of creativity, pushing the boundaries of what's possible in entertainment like those sounds were, it comes with a heavy price. Such intellectual behemoths have to be fed. The energy requirements alone are similar to The Flash, and that was sorted out by Hassan coming along with pizza and paying $500 worth to donate it to the picket line. As of yet, I don't have any information about the number that had pineapple on, but I do have live footage of somebody desperately trying to choke one down.
L'chaim.
Uh-huh.
Yeah! You get in there! It's disgusting.
Although all didn't go well for Hassan and the ants from Quantumania, when someone from the Elden Ring award ceremony turned up and decided to picket the picket line.
We love landlords. We're here to protest against the landlords and the unions. Landlords, landlords.
You want to move away a little bit?
And throughout all of this, you have the timing involved. You could have done this at any time during the streaming gold rush, but instead, you decided to do it during the streaming collapse, at a time during an economic downturn where companies are firing thousands of employees. You decide that now is the time to ask for more money, and not just ask for more money, at a time when companies are realizing that streaming actually isn't that profitable at all. It's certainly not as profitable as making movies. Companies were willing to throw away money before to try and get market share, and that's just not happening anymore, which is why properties are being cancelled and employees are getting axed. And you choose that moment to ask for massive pay rises, even down to the residuals, where you wanted up to 150% or $20,000, where the maximum they were willing to offer you would be 8. Even coming down to wanting residuals based off viewership and other things, which just got outright rejected. Although I do 100% agree that we definitely need transparency regarding program views. And don't get me wrong, I am not against scriptwriters getting paid more. I just want individuals to get paid what they deserve. So good scriptwriters should definitely get paid more, and trash scriptwriters shouldn't. And they certainly shouldn't get subsidized at the cost of the actual quality scriptwriters having to take a pay cut just so talentless hacks can get paid money they don't deserve. This is why actually being transparent regarding program views is so important, because I am fully behind the writers to the point where if you write a successful show, you should be getting paid more money. That's just common sense. I'm not against pay increases, I'm just against the way that the WGA is going about it and the demands that they're asking for. Because there are definite upsides to the writer's strike. In fact, in some cases, the world seems to be healing. Late night shows shut down immediately after the Writers Guild strike was called. Isn't it incredible that on the late night comedy shows, you've got your comedian presenters who, they can't even write their own script. I don't even have a script for these videos. I turn my camera on and start talking. That's probably why there's so many cuts. But everything I say is off the cuff. I don't need a writer to write something for me. And nor should they. If any of these people actually have any talent, they should have been able to continue the show, and yet they couldn't. It's interesting, isn't it? Have to bear in mind that these are shows which most people don't even find funny in the first place. So if that's with the scriptwriters, just imagine how unfunny they are on their own. Maybe they'd be as funny as James Corden, a guy whose show got cancelled because he was losing $20 million a year. Honestly, I'm surprised the Americans even took him in the first place. He was never even that good over here. But to take him and give him that kind of budget, to me, is insanity. I don't know what anyone thought they were playing at. But when your show is losing $20 million a year, is now really the time to ask for a pay increase. I mean, if anything, the true downside of that story is that he is coming back over here, so I guess America had a lucky escape with that one. And in other good news, we even had Rafe Judkins going, I actually can't talk about the Wheel of Time, so here's actually a scriptwriter from the terrible first series I can show you. Even though the second series is made, he still can't actually promote it, which is kind of heartwarming, isn't it? He's just got so much confidence that the second series will be an astronomical success that he feels he can take time off from trying to get any goodwill towards the series ramped up. Like I say, the world is healing. But who am I to judge what these starving artists need to survive? Well, I guess we could just actually take the stats from Variety itself. We actually have the average annual film and TV writer pay. And as you can see here, the TV writer pay has actually gone up since 2008 significantly. If anything, it's the film writers who should be upset, as their pay has been in steady decline since around 2007. But even so, for both of these, the average annual film and TV writer pay is above $200,000 a year. We're hardly in food stamp territory, are we? And if we look at the minimum rates for television shows, week to week, staff writer minimum is over $5,000 a week. And this goes down on a sliding scale depending on how many weeks you get, but it's still minimum at $4,000 a week, with various different minimums depending on various different factors, which are far too complicated to get into in this video. And if you're interested in movies, then those are some of the minimums for that. All in all, rather excellent wages. Certainly nothing to be sniffed at, and far more than the average person in the street. And yet those are the people that are supposed to feel sorry for our starving artists. But the most interesting part of all of this is how our starving artists have responded to these terrible wages of $5,000 a week. We're fighting to stop the streamers and the studios from turning writing into a gig job. They're trying to take away our jobs and employ us for 1 day a week like we're Uber drivers. We're fighting for fairness. Firstly, I don't know why you think there's anything wrong with Uber drivers. And secondly, if a company only wants to employ you for 1 day a week, that's because that's all the work they've got for you. There is nothing more bizarre to me in this entire story than people asking for arbitrary hours to be set for them when the companies don't actually need them to be employed for that long. If you're only getting offered 1 day a week of work, that's because that's all the work there is. They can't employ you for 5 days of work because they don't have that much work to give you. This is simply a case of there's too many writers and not enough jobs, and that's only going to get worse in a situation where we're laying off employees and cancelling projects because the money is no longer there. And yet that's when you decided to put in all your list of demands. This is the Writers Guild desperately trying to fix a problem that they caused themselves. There's too many writers in our guild, there's not enough jobs for them, so what do? We start to demand minimum amounts of staff in the writers' rooms and guarantee weeks of work. And if you don't agree, we're going to cancel everything. We're going to go on strike, write nothing, block any of your productions, intimidate your staff, all to create a false demand for writers that simply doesn't exist in a business scenario. They want these companies to subsidize writers doing nothing, simply because the work doesn't exist for them. And like in many things, this is very obvious when you simply look at a graph. The number of film writers has stayed pretty much the same since 1995, whereas you look at TV writers, well, they have dramatically increased to record highs in recent years. And you can fully understand this with the explosion of streaming services. But now the bubble of streaming has begun to pop. Suddenly, you've got all of these extra writers and no jobs for them. This is why people are only getting 1 day of work a week. That's all there is. And you cannot, in a private business which is supposed to be making money, force companies to employ people for absolutely no reason when there isn't a job for them. You cannot get them to guarantee work for projects that simply do not need it. And then on top of all of that, you want your minimums increased and you want residuals. I am not against good writers getting paid more on projects that do well because they deserve it. But at the same time, companies have to make money, and you can't just arbitrarily employ people for no reason. Which is why the writers have resorted to other tactics, which is basically, we are going to harm your business until you agree to accept our offer, which will do less harm than we'll do to you otherwise. That's why we get things like talking about neutral gates, which from his own description is basically just a gate where people can drive into work. But no, that gets spun as union busting. Yeah, it's like the Hulk smasher of gates. Or there's the part where they're bragging about shutting down Marvel Studio shoots by walking up and down outside the gates and just preventing anyone from entering. Even people who aren't in the guild themselves don't want to cross the picket line, because even if you have nothing to do with us, we're still going to intimidate you into staying away. To me, it seems like very extortionate tactics done at the most inopportune of times. Not just because of the economic downturn, but also because if you increase your minimum wages, if you make the companies cost more, well, they're just going to look to replace you. This already happened with lots of industries and machines, but now with scriptwriters, we've got AI, which is definitely a point of contention when it comes to the strike. Because you see, in some industries, AI is already taking over scriptwriting jobs. Recently, Ubisoft came out and proudly announced that AI is helping write dialogue. It basically helps them write NPCs and do so at a much faster rate than they would be on their own, which seems particularly apt considering how many Hollywood writers are NPCs in their own right. And AI is something the Writers Guild are very worried about themselves. In their own demands, they said, we want to regulate the use of artificial intelligence to the point where AI can't write or rewrite literary material, and it can't be used as a source material, nor can MBA-covered material be used to train AI. To which this was just rejected. And they said, yeah, we'll discuss it annually with you. But basically, they weren't going to get forced into a corner they couldn't back out of, as this is a very fast-moving technology, and they won't want to say no to something which could change in the future and be incredibly helpful. And that's also likely the same reason that they want to get a no already, when AI itself is probably not that useful now, but everybody knows it's going to be in the future. And if you go around making stupid demands, like asking companies to pay people who are literally no use to a project at all, what you do is raise their cost basis, which makes them even more likely to want to use AI. We're not just shooting ourselves in the foot here, we're going the whole hog. This is why you get articles like this. TV writers say they're striking to stop the destruction of their profession. Because sure, we'll talk about minimums and residuals, but really I get the idea that the AI demand is actually far more important than the rest of it. Whereas the minimum staffing requirements is more like getting your Borg drones to dig a hole and then fill it in again. You don't really care what they do, you just want your members to have work so they won't moan. To stop saying things like the amount of time we have to work has shrunk to the point where we're only working 6, 10, or maybe 12 weeks in a year, and you can't piece together a sustainable living doing that. Now, normally what you do if you have a part-time job is you get a second part-time job, but considering the comments about Uber drivers, they probably look down on that idea themselves. But they say, we thought actually not using AI would be an easy layup for us, simply because AI is not currently usable in any shape or form. But the issue is, the businesses said no. And Connor called it, it's like asking someone, hey, would you agree that you're not going to pull out a gun and shoot me in the stomach? And the person says, I'm not going to agree to that. Suddenly you think, wait, I didn't think you were going to do that, but now I'm worried you are, or else you'd agree not to do it. And the answer is, well, yes, obviously they're going to use AI. Obviously they're going to cut back on writers and use AI to multiply the few high-quality writers they retain in order to pump out far more high-quality work in the long run. This is common sense. This is the most efficient business. This is how you get the highest quality work. This is how you make the most entertainment for the cheapest money. Of course they're going to do this. What did you think they were going to do? But when the people striking are likening the AI situation to pulling out a gun and shooting someone in the stomach, I have a feeling that's one of the more significant demands. And you know what? I may have more sympathy if the writers hadn't spent years destroying properties from my childhood, or when they went on strike didn't go around just causing mass trouble, blocking production, intimidating people, and basically going around insulting people who didn't deserve it. People like Jenna Ortega. This is someone who got handed a script where her character was nothing like how her character should act, and so she changed it, improved it, and went about helping create one of the most successful shows of the year. I can understand that writers may not like other people actually improving their work, but you can't argue with the results if she changed the character and people loved the character and loved her performance of it. You should just take the L and accept that she improved it. At the end of the day, what's the problem? Your writing name is still on the credits. You can still use that to your advantage and get paid more for your next job because you wrote an incredibly successful show. Or we could start mocking somebody who helped us make that successful show. Now, if I was striking to get more pay, I don't think drawing attention to my own incompetence by talking about how an actor has improved my work is a strategy I would use personally. But then again, these are Hollywood writers. If they're actually talented, we wouldn't be in this position to begin with. No, I think them insulting her, telling her that she should be on the picket line as well, is exactly what I expected. Making signs about how without writers, Jenna Ortega will have nothing to punch up. One thing to bear in mind when you're doing strike action is you should keep the public on your side, because your strike will be actively harming the customer. In this case, because you're not writing, and because you are actively shutting down other shoots that can carry on without you. What you are doing is taking entertainment away from the customers that you want to keep on your side. And it's not their job to care about you. It's not their job to worry about your wages. All they see, or all they have to see, is that you are taking away their entertainment and they don't like it. Now, in this industry, there is lag from creation to actually showing things, so you have more leeway than you would with most strikes, where the effect is felt by the customers very quickly. But even with that, I would suggest that you act with a bit more class and decorum, and definitely don't go after actresses which the customers actually like, because it was one of the few shows that was massively successful. And even despite all of this, maybe it would make sense if I could at least get behind the idea that the writers were acting in their own self-interest. But they're not. The WGA and their demands is actively harming the average salary of a writer. And so if you're a writer who's talented, why are you engaging in this behavior? As it says here, nearly half of all writers are working on the contract's minimum compensation level, regardless of experience. And I don't know why that's a surprise, because what you've got is the WGA negotiating minimums, but what they're actually negotiating is a fee. Without the guild, each individual would approach the company and negotiate their own pay based off their own merit and skill and experience and actual quality of work. But when you do this with a guild, you're subservient. You give them your negotiation power, and they, on behalf of the collective group of Borg,
From this time forward, you will service us.
make sure that everybody gets paid the same, regardless of experience. So of course half are all on the minimum, because it's not a minimum. It's the fee. And it means the vast majority of people have no leg to stand on, no negotiation power, because you've already negotiated with us, mate. Without the guild, everyone would get paid what they're worth, some more, some less. But just because you increase a minimum doesn't mean that you've increased the value of the work. With a minimum wage, you have a minimum floor, but some people's labor is worth less than that, and some will be worth more. And so you end up dragging down the people who deserve to get paid more to subsidize the people who don't. And this is why the WGA is actually harmful to the scriptwriters, because nearly half of all writers shouldn't be on that minimum. A lot of those people would get paid more if the WGA didn't exist at all and they could negotiate based off their own merits. Some people would get paid less, but those people write things like Valma, so it's getting paid according to merit. And this is the crux of the argument for me, because some writers come along and go, look, I think I deserve to be paid more, and I agree with them. But there's also a lot of people who don't, and you're the ones subsidizing them. What you've got is a load of writers who have given up their individual power, their individual merit, in order to kneel before the Borg. And so, rather than being able to rise up in the industry based off their own skill and talent, instead, they're brought down to the level of everybody else, the lowest common denominator, and they're literally having to pay for them, to subsidize them. And that's only going to get worse with what the WGA are currently doing. Because with minimum staff rooms of 6 people, those wages for that project are going to get split 6 ways. So maybe before you could have had a writing room of 2 people and got paid more for it. But now, thanks to the WGA, well, you're not going to get paid more. All 6 of you are getting the minimum. Oh, and that 13-week guarantee, yeah, you're definitely getting paid the minimum. And maybe those 2 people could have got employed for 26 weeks. But now we've got to hire 6 of you, so you're definitely only getting 13. That's my problem with all this. I'm not against people that write good stuff actually getting paid more money. I'm against good writers getting dragged down by talentless hacks that create nothing of quality, and yet, due to some kind of collective wisdom, they get dragged kicking and screaming onto the same level as the quality writers, to an area where they don't deserve and could never reach there on their own. And sure, for the talentless people that ruin every project they end up on, it's great, they get paid more money. But for the good guys, the ones who could get there on their own individual merit, all they get is suffering, because there's a massive weight dragging them down and they have no way to get rid of it. And there are solutions to all of these problems. The good writers could have their wage increases and their residuals. Even in a world where we're firing employees and cancelling projects, you could still have both. The issue is you have to make business decisions. And so, in a world where the writers increased with the surge of streaming services, which are now decreasing, well, obviously the number of writers do as well, because the supply of writers is outstripping the demand of the people that need them to write. The solution to that isn't to falsely inflate demand. You don't need minimum staff room or guaranteed week times. You don't need to get them to dig a hole just to fill it in again so they have something to do. That's not how business works. If businesses don't need as many writers, then the lower quality writers stop writing. It means that businesses can be picky. They hire only the best writers who make only the best projects, and everybody wins. The entertainment level improves, the customers pay you more money, the companies make more money, and maybe, just maybe, that allows them to make more projects and hire more writers overall. But this cripples them. This means that the talented writers can't get more money because they're too busy subsidizing the people who don't deserve it. Projects get cancelled because they're no longer viable, because they've got to employ too many staff who simply aren't needed on the project to begin with. And the only reason any of this holds water to begin with is because of the tactics they use, that we will come down and harm your business, damage your productivity, and make you lose money until you back down and go, okay, we'll pay your protection racket fee. Yes, we'll lose a load of money employing people that we don't need, but it'll still be cheaper than having you actually harm our business actively for months on end. I think those are disgusting tactics. I think those are horrible things to do. And I think people instead should negotiate individually based off their own personal merit and backlog of work. Let the talented people float to the top, the dregs sink to the bottom, and maybe it'll end up with some people moving on to a different career. But for me, that's far better than employing someone to sit in a room where they're simply not needed, simply because a guild forced them to be there for arbitrary reasons. To me, it seems like an insane system, with a guild that makes up insane rules. A system which does indeed help the most incompetent writers to earn more, but only at the cost of talent, only at the cost of their wages that they deserve, and yet are being taken away from them and given to people who would never earn that on their own. So yes, I would love talented writers to get paid more. If you make a great series, of course, you deserve more. Of course, You deserve a cut of that success. But under the system you've got, you'll never see that cut, because that cut keeps getting taken away from you to subsidize people who don't deserve it. And so until you get rid of things like minimum staffing levels, and instead focus on a we get paid by performance outlook, then really I just don't see how you can have both, because you can't employ people in an industry where they're simply not needed, and also actually get paid what you deserve. At this point, you're going to have to choose one or the other. But those are just my thoughts. What are yours? Let me know down in the comments below. Like the video if you like the video. Subscribe. More videos like this in the future. And I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.